Religion. I mean, think about it. For literally billions of people, it's the framework for everything: how they live, what they believe is right and wrong, and, how they answer those huge questions about life and death. It's one of the most powerful forces in all of human history, without a doubt. So let's dive in and take a quick look at some of the world's biggest faiths to see what they're all about.
So, okay, that brings us to the big question, right? What do they actually believe? What are the core ideas guiding all those lives? We're going to break it down, and we'll start with a group of major faiths that, believe it or not, all trace their roots back to one single person.
First up, we've got the Abrahamic faiths. And as you can probably guess from the name, they all trace their spiritual family tree back to a prophet named Abraham. It's this single root that grew into branches that have spread all over the world.
Okay, so here's the key thing that links them together. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all what we call Abrahamic because they're monotheistic. That's just a fancy way of saying they believe in one and only one God. They also all see themselves as part of a story that started with a special promise or a covenant that this one God made with Abraham way back when.
And you can see how this story unfolded over time. Judaism is the oldest of the three, kicking things off with Abraham way back around 1800 BCE. Fast forward many centuries, and Christianity emerges from right inside Judaism with the birth of Jesus. Then, about 600 years after that, Islam comes into being through the revelations given to the Prophet Muhammad.
But even with that shared family tree, they definitely have some pretty major disagreements on core ideas. I mean, just take a look at how they see God. Judaism and Islam are super clear. There is one God, period. But Christianity introduces this idea of the Trinity. God is three persons in one being. And yeah, Jesus himself is a huge point of difference. Was he just a Jewish teacher, the divine son of God, or a highly respected prophet? The answer you get depends entirely on who you ask.
Okay, now let's shift gears completely and head over to a totally different branch of the spiritual family tree. These are the Dharmic traditions, and they started out in the Indian subcontinent. They offer a completely different way of looking at life, the universe, and, what our role is in all of it. So to really get a handle on these faiths, you've got to know two key ideas. First, there's this concept called samsara. This is the belief that we're all stuck in this endless cycle of being born, dying, and then being reborn again. And what happens in your next life is determined by something called karma. Think of it as a universal law of cause and effect. The good and bad things you do in this life directly impact what your next one will be like. And for these traditions, the whole point, the ultimate goal, is to find a way to break free from that cycle for good.
So how do you do that? Well, in Hinduism, which is the oldest of these faiths, escaping this cycle comes from this incredibly deep moment of understanding. It's summed up in this famous phrase, Atman is Brahman. Basically, it means that your individual self, your soul, that's the Atman, is actually the same thing as Brahman, which is the ultimate divine reality of the entire universe. It's realizing that you're not a separate drop, you're part of the entire ocean. And that realization, that's what sets you free.
Now, Buddhism came out of that same spiritual world as Hinduism, but it starts with a different diagnosis for what's wrong with the human condition. The core foundational idea is this: life is suffering. And where does all that suffering come from? It comes from desire. From our constant wanting, craving, and clinging to things that just don't last.
The Buddhist solution to this problem is laid out so clearly in what they call the Four Noble Truths. It's this really elegant, logical path. Think of it like a doctor's plan. First, the diagnosis. There is suffering. Second, the cause. Suffering is caused by desire. Third, the prognosis. Good news, there's a cure. And fourth, the prescription. Here's the path you need to follow to end that suffering. And there's another really fascinating faith from this part of the world, Sikhism. What's so interesting is that it kind of bridges the two worlds we've talked about. It shares ideas like karma and rebirth with Hinduism and Buddhism, but just like the Abrahamic faiths, it is absolutely strictly monotheistic. The very core of their belief, the Mool Mandar, starts with the words Ek Onkar, which means there is only one God. Okay, but of course these two big families of religion, the Abrahamic and the Dharmic, don't even begin to cover the whole story. The world is full of so many different beliefs. So let's just take a quick peek at a couple of other global faiths to get a sense of just how diverse human spirituality really is. Take the Baha'i faith, for example. It's one of the newer world religions, and its central message is just full of hope and unity.
The core idea is that all of humanity is basically one big family, and that our destiny is to eventually unite and create a peaceful, just global society.
And then if we head over to Japan, you'll find Shinto. This is the country's ancient native religion, and it's not so much about one all-powerful god. It's more focused on the kami, these divine spirits that are believed to live in nature, in everything from a majestic mountain to a river or even an old tree. The whole focus is on purity, living in harmony with nature, and having this really deep respect for your family and traditions.
All right, so we've been on a whirlwind tour, right? We've talked about covenants, the Trinity, karma, kami. It's a lot. And on the surface, they all seem so incredibly different. But what happens if we step back for a second? Is there something, anything, that connects them all?
I mean, look at this. The differences are just huge. In Judaism, you have a God who rules through a binding agreement. In Christianity, a loving God who wants a personal relationship. In Islam, a God who is all-powerful and beyond our full understanding. Then you have Hinduism, with one ultimate reality showing up in millions of forms. And Buddhism, which doesn't even have a deity in the first place. You couldn't get more different in your view of a higher power. In the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism, the universe is literally a stage for an epic battle. On one side, you have Ahura Mazda, the force of good and light. On the other, Ahriman, the spirit of evil and darkness. And here's the key. This isn't just a story about gods. It puts a massive choice right in front of every single human being. You have to pick a side. And this framework, this cosmic struggle with good versus evil, had a huge influence, later shaping parts of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But what if the cosmos isn't a battlefield? What if it's more like a dance? Let's totally flip the script and look at a worldview where the opposing forces aren't enemies, but are actually essential partners in a delicate cosmic balance. And that brings us to Taoism. Here, the view of reality is completely different. Instead of a war, Taoism gives us this picture of harmony between opposites. You've all seen the yin and yang symbol, right? Light needs darkness. Order needs chaos. They aren't fighting each other. They literally define one another.
So in this way of thinking, the goal isn't for one side to win. The whole purpose of life is to align yourself with the natural, effortless flow of the universe itself. And this underlying principle is called the Tao, which simply means the way.
This actually highlights a really cool distinction, especially within Chinese philosophy. While Taoism is all about our connection to the giant, vast universe, another major school of thought, Confucianism, kind of zooms right in on a different type of harmony. For Confucius, the most important thing wasn't aligning with the cosmos. It was perfecting the relationships between people to create a peaceful and orderly society. So back to Taoism for a second. How do you actually live in harmony with the Tao? Well, the key concept is something called wu wei. It often gets translated as non-action, but that's a bit misleading. It's more like effortless action. Just think about water flowing in a stream. It doesn't try to smash through a big rock. It just flows around it, naturally. That's wu wei, acting so in tune with the way things are that you get amazing results without struggle or force. Okay, so we've got a cosmic battle on one side and a cosmic dance on the other. But what happens when these incredibly different worldviews don't just stay separate? What new understanding can you get when you actually combine them? Well, that brings us all the way up to the 20th century, to a really fascinating religion that started in Vietnam called Taoism. Its whole goal, right from the beginning, was to unite the world's great faiths into one single path for all of us. And they are not shy about how they do it. They intentionally pull in teachings from all over the world. They blend the ideas of karma and rebirth from Buddhism, the social ethics from Confucianism, and they even use a formal structure that looks a whole lot like the one in the Catholic Church. It's a truly modern attempt at a universal faith. You can see this blend of ideas perfectly in their main symbol, the divine eye. It represents God watching over and guiding all of humanity. It's an image that somehow feels both incredibly ancient and strikingly modern all at once. And make no mistake, this isn't some tiny fringe movement. In just under a century, Taoism has grown to about 6 million followers. It's a pretty powerful example of how a new blend of ancient ideas can really take root in the modern world. So this all leads to a really big question, right? We've seen a war, a dance, and a synthesis. With all these different maps of the cosmos, where are they all supposed to lead? What's the final destination for humanity in each of these systems? What are we supposed to be doing?
What's really interesting is that even though the paths are so different, the end goals often start to sound pretty similar. A lot of the time, it comes down to a kind of liberation. For some, like in Taoism or Jainism, the main goal is to escape the cycle of reincarnation and find lasting peace. For others, it's about reaching a state of perfect harmony, or what they call a joyous life, right here on Earth.
Now, this idea of a cycle is central to a lot of Eastern religions. It's called samsara. You can think of it as the wheel of suffering, this endless loop of death and rebirth that people want to break free from. It's a fundamentally different way of looking at existence from the single life, final judgment model that's more common in many Western traditions. So, after all of this, after exploring cosmic wars and universal dances, what's the big takeaway? Well, maybe the most important spiritual landscape isn't out there in the cosmos at all. Maybe it's right here, inside each and every one of us. As the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn famously said, the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being.
And yet, here's the really amazing thing. If you dig down beneath all the specific rules, the different rituals, and the complex theology, every single one of these paths is pointed at the exact same goal. They are all, in their own way, offering a roadmap that they say leads to one thing: everlasting happiness for the human soul.
And that shared goal, well, it leads us to one last and maybe kind of tough question to think about.
It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If every pilgrim on every one of these paths is ultimately chasing the very same thing for their soul, then why on earth do we spend so much time fighting with each other on the way there?